I don't know if you have heard the phrase, spare the rod, spoil the child. And when is it you first heard it? As for me, I first heard it in my primary school. And now, with the benefit of hindsight, I think the teachers used to use it to justify corporal punishment. But the use of corporal punishment begs the question, were they successful? I mean, if you shall use corporal punishment as an aid to teaching, shall you achieve those desired results, not only for the present, but also for the future? And now, many years later, after all of those beatings and whippings, I am forced to think about its effectiveness. And from my own opinion, I think now that the use of the rod, at least in my time, was the easiest and quickest way for teachers to obtain their desired goals. Whether it was to keep us quiet in class, or to make us cram or memorize content, or whether it was to make us push our parents to pay school fees. You see, when you do that, it means that the teachers can indiscriminately use the rod. For whatever reason, again, indiscriminately, to the extent that they become abusive. Another problem with using the rod, at least based on that indiscriminate or abusive use, is that it generalized all children. You know, all children, regardless of their physical differences, emotional, mental, or psychological, regardless of their economic backgrounds, they were all assumed to be some homogeneous entity, such that if they are outliers, those outliers really suffered. So, for instance, concern would only be made when all teachers have really beaten this child over and over again, and perhaps they are now tired. And seeing that they have a common experience of this child having beaten him or her, then they would consider what might be the problem, you know. And after so many beatings, it is now discovered that the child who sits at the back of the class cannot see the blackboard, or the child that sits farthest from the teacher cannot hear what they are saying, or perhaps there are some problems back at home that makes this child come late to school, or problems that see to it that school fees is not paid. But you see, that is only discovered after the child has been traumatized. And so we can conclude and say the success rate is questionable. It is quite questionable. So what does the Bible say to that situation? At least for me, being a pastor, you know, that proverb actually comes from Proverbs 13:24, where the Bible says, "He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves his son will be sure to discipline him." See, the responsibility of discipline is given to the father who loves his child, a father who is proud of this child, a father who is genuinely concerned for this child's well-being, or even a parent that is long-sighted and is preparing that child for the future. I doubt, based on how many we were at that school, if these teachers were acting out of motherly or fatherly concerns. I think most of them were dealing with their own personal issues, and we were merely scapegoats that received the brunt of their stresses. Regardless, another verse is in Psalms 23 verse 4, where the Bible says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me." See, that verse really opens one's eyes about the use of a rod. You see, when the sheep and the shepherd are both in the dark places, it means that the shepherd is empathetic and the shepherd identifies with the sheep's condition. And the use of a rod is only to mitigate destruction, death, or injury. In fact, the Bible says, your staff and rod, they comfort me. There is an implication of trust between the sheep and the shepherd, such that the sheep understands that the shepherd is acting out of preservation, the preservation of the sheep. And seeing that, it would mean that that is if discipline actually boils down to whipping, that this it can only be constructive in the hands of a true shepherd. And I don't know how many there are outside there.